All right, my English teacher friends. So I have a rhetorical analysis writing workshop for you here, and it's centering around a very fascinating letter that Einstein wrote to his daughter, Lieserl. So, on the little history that I've done with regards to these letters, back in the late 1980s, Lieserl donated 1,400 letters that Einstein wrote to the Hebrew University under strict orders not to release these to the public until 20 years after her death. And so some of these are just coming to surface, and this is the most fascinating one. If you have a hard time finding the letter, I'm more than happy to send it to you. It's called On Love. On Love. So a letter from Einstein to his daughter, Lieserl, on love. So in this particular writing workshop, I'm going to Bob Ross my instruction for you and show you exactly how my students would deconstruct the text and then cobble together the essay while pulling the strings of my templates. So we'll revisit the declarative thesis in terms of constructing the introductory paragraph, and then we'll build the body paragraph syllogistically, just like always. So that's the beauty of my templates. It totally demystifies the writing process for our students. They can do the exact same thing across the expository modes. So already alluded to this, so I'm going to Bob Ross my instruction for you. So let's imagine that you're my students in my class. What I would do when you would come into class is, get to my easel, get to my canvas, and actually paint a few introductions and body paragraphs for you, demonstrating how to manipulate my templates. In doing so, it really sets the difference between the assigning of writing and the direct explicit teaching of it. When I work with teachers, I always encourage them to position themselves as the expert in the classroom and paint with your students. Show them what you got, right? You're a good writer, and show them exactly how to execute this essay. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is this: how do I write the introductory paragraph? So those that are familiar with my work, you know that I tell my students to either declare or invert the thesis, but it's wholly contingent upon the expository mode. And again, for those that are really familiar with my work, you know that for rhetorical analysis, my students always 100% of the time, I encourage them to declare the thesis. So declare for rhetorical analysis, invert for literary analysis, and then synthesis, argument, persuasion, and research. It's a 50-50 coin flip, pretty contingent upon the prompt, the language in the prompt. But usually it's just a coin flip. Students can go either way for the argumentative pieces. So implicit in every prompt, rhetorical analysis prompt, you have two questions. What is the authorial intent, and how does the author construct meaning? So, and again, I think a lot of you are familiar with my work at this stage of the game. For literary analysis, what we do is this. The first three sentences of the introductory paragraph focus on authorial intent, and the fourth sentence in the introductory paragraph answers the question, how does the author construct meaning? And that's an inverted thesis. So what we do in rhetorical analysis is just flip it. We're going to focus on how does the author construct meaning, right? And I have my students focus on the three most salient moves that the author or the orator makes in the rhetorical piece. So the three most salient, pertinent rhetorical terms and or devices, and then tie it all into the authorial intent. So what's the exigence? What was the main oomph for the author to write this particular letter that we're going to look at? So when we declare, we begin with the thesis. What's the most important rhetorical feature right out of the gate? We're going to sprinkle in some tier 2 level vocabulary, and what I mean by that is just your average run-of-the-mill SAT level word. Sprinkle in some context and background without being plot summative. We don't want to be regurgitative. We just need a little bit of context and background. And then one of the things that I really focus on in my word study academies and nuance academies is the work of Strunk and White. In one of their texts called Write It Right, they espouse the idea that there's 12 different ways to construct a single sentence. You'll see my students hopefully achieve some nice voice rhythm and flow through the vocab, because this is a very academic task, but also through the manipulation of their syntax. They can wield some complex sentences, and they know when to drop certain sentences for effect and purpose. So that's really good in terms of getting students to earn the sophistication point. And then lastly, every introductory paragraph is going to be exactly 4 sentences. So the opposite of this, and we don't need to spend any time on it because we're doing a rhetorical analysis, is the inverted. It's flip it on its head. You end with the thesis. So you might begin with a hook, an analogy, the context, the background, and whittle it all the way down to the thesis last. So in my classroom, I have a Velcro board that looks like this. And we read a lot in my class, a lot of short text to prepare for FRQ2 on the AP Lang exam. And I tell my guys, if we see a term at least 3 times, it's going to go on our board. And at the time of reading Einstein, these are all the terms that we had seen recur at least 3 times in the various pieces that we've read. So over the course of the academic year in AP Lang, we probably read anywhere from 40 to 50 different rhetorical pieces. I only use short text. I don't do anything long. So just short, 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 and that way I feel that my students become very good readers. So all of these terms and devices they had seen at least 3 times at the introduction of Einstein. So let's take a look at a few introductions. So students are going to start with, sort of the exigence. What's the universal theme, the truth, right? What are the most salient rhetorical terms, devices that Einstein uses to construct the meaning of this letter? So let's see what the student does right out of the gate. The greatest mind history has ever known simplified the meaning of life to one simple word: love. Enumerating, so you see, you use the terms here, enumerating the endless power of this singular force, Einstein explains to his daughter the fact that love holds the keys to solving all of the universe's mysteries. In spite of his many groundbreaking theories, the scientist sets aside his own stature. So we're getting into ethos here. You don't need to say the words. I like it when my students imply it instead of directly stating it. So the second term they're going to focus on is the ethos. So the scientist sets aside his own stature to proclaim that the answers to everything rest upon the enormity of this 4-letter word. But be it as it may, Einstein knows that the world is not ready to receive his postulations, so implores his daughter to keep things under wraps for a future time that might be more receptive. So you get into the logos, the ethos, and the big part in this is Einstein's grappling with his ethos of, wow, I think the whole universe revolves around the concept of love and the energy of love. And coming from the scientist of this stature and enormity, he thinks he's going to get ridiculed and mocked for suggesting such things. So you see the 3 terms and devices in here, followed by context, background, and it's authorial intent, construction of meaning every single time. So usually I tell kids, lead with the most important aspect of the piece. So let's see it done again by a different writer. In a letter to his daughter, the most brilliant mind history has ever known delineates the answer to the universe's longest standing riddle. Love controls the strings of everything and is the answer to all of life's mysteries. Right? So you start with the logos, enumerating the endless and seismic power of love. Einstein reasons. So we're getting into a little bit of the syntax, we're getting into the logos. Einstein reasons that it's the one force scientists have not been able to peg down, yet it's the force that binds everything together. Knowing that his reputation is at stake, he implores his daughter to keep his adapted equation secret until the world becomes more ready to receive such a profound truth. Further, Einstein touchingly shares his newly devised theory to express his heartfelt and everlasting love for his daughter, Lieserl. So we touch upon pathos here at the end. So each time, it's the three most salient, the three most pertinent, the three most relevant terms, context, background. Look at the vocab in this, really nice. Delineates. What else? Enumerates. Implores. So you don't have to overdo the vocab, but even simple things like profound, devised, heartfelt, everlasting. So this really good blend of academic with some casual, I think rhetorical analysis is probably the most academic of the expository modes. So the students don't want to get too colloquial or vernacular in it. But it's fine if they do a little bit, but they got to really pour it on and be. I tell my kids to geek out, nerd out for rhetorical analysis and up the vocab a little bit. So 2 for 2 done the exact same way. Here's another one. Humanity's greatest theorist reduced the meaning of life to one word, love. So one thing we haven't talked about yet is sentence constructs. Look at what my students are doing in all of these. So there's great voice, rhythm, flow. My students avoid the short, simple declarative sentence followed by short, simple declarative sentence followed by short, simple declarative sentence, which is something that emerging and struggling writers do often. So this takes a lot of practice. And it's at the heart of my Nuance Academy, practicing wielding and manipulating all these various sentence constructs for effect and purpose. So I'll take it from the top again. Humanity's greatest theorist reduced the meaning of life to one word, love. Expressing his own limitations as a father, Einstein enumerates the vastness of love and its eternal force as the single most common denominator of the universe. Knowing full well that his adapted theory will garner him ridicule and scorn, he encourages Lieserl to conceal his findings until a future time when humanity is ready to receive such a simple profundity. Elongating his sentences, or into the syntax, to give voice to his enthusiastic discovery, so that's probably touching upon tone. The world's most renowned theorist lets his daughter know that this is not just a matter of science, but of his heart and conscience. So a little bit of pathos there. So it's like a poker match where you're basically showing the folks at your table, your reader, the cards of your line of reasoning, right? So I promise you, dear reader, that I'm going to touch upon these things in the rest of my essay in the body paragraphs, but these are the most important things that Einstein is doing in terms of his intent and the construction of his meaning. So you always focus on the three most salient, relevant, pertinent terms: context, background, sentence constructs, tier 2. Every single time students can do this when they perform rhetorical analysis. It doesn't matter what the text is. So this is what my students do every single time uniformly for FRQ2 on the AP Lang exam, and even in my Gen Ed classes when we do rhetorical analysis. This is how I have them do it. And, even in time situations, such as in the AP language exam, they have plenty of time to do this because they're so habituated to writing this way and manipulating this template that it becomes instinctual and intuitive. So the next question is this: how do I write the body paragraphs? And again, for those that are familiar with my work, you're going to say, holy cow, this guy's not joking, and this works every single time. You can bust out the syllogistic method. And for those that are new to me, I'll go over this briefly, just give a cursory glance at it. If you want to do a deeper dive into the syllogistic method, there's plenty of videos in my YouTube channel where I unpack this with greater depth and clarity than what I'm going to do now. I'm going to assume that people are familiar with me at this stage of the game. So the syllogistic method is rooted in the Aristotelian tradition. So it comes from Aristotle. He ran a school called the Lyceum, and the rich aristocratic boys would go there to learn about polemics, debate, oration, word wrangling, word smithing, just basic linguistics. And oftentimes in his school, they would throw out these juicy, pithy, essential questions. And you may have read perhaps Plato's Republic, where they throw out the essential question, what is justice? And these great philosophical think tankers come to the mic and they drop their definition, and they gloat in their genius. And then the other students and philosophers gather around and find all the bullet holes in the logic. Basically, Aristotle, like us composition teachers, was looking for a fancy word: cogency, logic, bulletproof logic. We call it line of reasoning. So when students argue from premise, conclusion, they are making syllogistic constructs. So take a look at this one here. So if I say premise 1, arsenic is deadly. Premise 2, my dog ate arsenic. Conclusion, my dog is going to die. That's a very cogent argument. No one would disagree with that and say, Christian, my goodness, you're way off. Your logic is flawed. So when students argue in their papers, we want them to be this lockstep, this computative, this mathematical, and organized in their thinking. So that's one of the things that I think gets lost in composition, is that students and perhaps even teachers too forget that all expository writing is an act of argument. And in reading a lot of anchor papers for FRQ2 for the Lang exam, I see a lot of plot summation. I see kids doing a very nice job of giving like a Cliff Note summation of the text they've been assigned, but I don't see a lot of rhetorical analysis. So the syllogistic method, when we adapt it for rhetorical analysis, looks like this. And if students adhere to this template, they're going to be writing rhetorical analysis from start to finish. They're really going to hammer home the demands of the assignment. So the first premise is an argument containing terms and devices. And that always takes 3 sentences. My first premises, no matter what the expository mode, is always going to be 3 sentences. On FRQ1, the College Board says your argument must be central. And I say that to my students every time they write expository pieces. Your argument must be central. Otherwise, they run the risk of getting plot heavy. Premise 2 is going to be the textual support, and I like to see a nice teeter-totter balance between the quoting and the paraphrasing. And then the conclusion is the textual analysis, where the student will make links, the promise to the first premise and the echo back to the thesis. So the syllogism ultimately comes full circle on itself. And just a note of clarity, when I say conclusion, I don't mean conclusion paragraph of the essay. I mean that the syllogistic body paragraph needs a conclusion. It needs to wrap up. You just can't abandon the analysis and walk away from it. So let's take a look at the first 3 sentences, which is going to comprise the first premise. Students ask good questions, and they often ask, where do I begin, Mr. Kuhn? And I would say, start where Einstein starts. So indicate to your reader that you have utmost chronology, sequence, and organizational skills. So you'll see my students say things like this right from the onset. It cues the reader into knowing that you are going to be very precise and systematic in your execution of this analysis. So start where Einstein starts, and then cross-weave, cross-analyze as necessary, but just go methodically through it. That's a great way to organize. And then, bounce around, when you need to, and you have a deliberate reason to do so. So the first 3 sentences, we're going to find what Einstein is doing up top of the letter, right? Early on in the letter, and we're going to set ourselves up to analyze those things. The first premise being 3 sentences is also nice because it gets kids away from 1 paragraph ethos, 1 paragraph logos, 1 paragraph pathos, 1 paragraph syntax, 1 paragraph tone. We don't want students doing that. It's too methodic. It's too elementary. So in the 3 sentences up here, students can begin to multitask the first premise and see where the pieces unify the work as a whole. So look what this student does here. Right from the onset, Einstein knows that his current conjectures might compromise his already questionable standing in the scientific community. So right out of the gate, he's concerned about his ethos. So that's what's being alluded to here. Knowing that humanity is not evolved enough to receive his amended theories, he kindly asks his daughter to conceal his letter until the world is ready for such a profound answer to its mysteries. Science, in spite of its incredible advancements, has overlooked the biggest singular force, the power of love. So we're basically getting into ethos and logos here, because we're going to study the equation that he manipulates to make his thesis that love is the answer to everything. Second premise begins fourth sentence. Immediately get quoting and paraphrasing. So you talked about ethos first here. You got to talk about ethos first here, and then the logos will come down here. So there's two things going on in that first premise. So in writing workshops, I often say, all right, put your first premise in the language of a promise. I promise you, dear reader, that I'm going to talk about ethos first and logo second. So it needs to go ethos first, logo second. So let's see what happens here. Let's see if the line of reasoning stays intact. Immediately, his first rhetorical move is to safeguard his ethos, because quantum explanations of love surely will collide with the misunderstanding and prejudice in the world. So you see that fourth sentence, get quoting, get paraphrasing. And that's a perfect quote right there, right? It supports the ambivalent nature of his ethos, right? Of wanting this letter concealed for years and years and years. So we quote, we analyze. Knowing that the world in which he lives is one that is wrought by greed, destruction, war, and selfishness, Einstein implores his daughter to guard the letters as long as necessary, years, decades, until society is advanced enough to accept his profound theories on love. So note the quote transitions here. I got a template called the 5-word rule. If a student places a minimum of 5 words, so a minimum, not exactly, a minimum of 5 words in front of the quote and keeps the quote small, it should sound conversational. And that's what's going on here with these 2 quotes thus far. So keep on going. Ever since the advent of the modern sciences, man has sought the answers to solve the mysteries of the universe. Einstein, perhaps the greatest thinker known to history, posits that scientists forgot the most powerful unseen force. Almost like a numerical listing in an equation, he enumerates the vast magnitude of love's eternal depth and reach. At first, Einstein suggests that love is light, that enlightens those who give and receive it. So you see here, kids have to take from the text and quote with deliberation. That's one of the beauties of my template, is that oftentimes when students write, they know they need to quote, they know they need to paraphrase, but it seems so haphazard and willy-nilly, and that's where the line of reasoning breaks down. They just quote for the sake of quoting, or they're paraphrasing just their basic comprehension of the text, and there's no purpose. The purpose is to argue. You have to argue the ethos and the logos, and that's what this student is doing very methodically here. So we move on. It is significant that he makes love and light proper nouns in his amended equation. Syntactically, this emphasis and formality allows him to deliver his grand conclusion that love is God and God is love. So we got a lot of support and analysis in here so far. We're at the conclusion. Let's go back. Did we talk about the ethos and the logos? Yeah, all the quotes are germane to that. All the paraphrases are germane to that. But you can see students can also bring in, if they do it quickly, you don't want to run away from the line of reasoning. So they talked about the syntax here, but the syntax is linked to the logos and the ethos. So that's fair game. And, we want a total read, so it's completely fine that that's in there. So the conclusion, we're going to keep the promise of the first premise, echo the thesis, echo the prompt. The root of most scientific inquiry is to obtain the knowledge of the gods and of the heavens, to unlock the secrets of the universe. And here is Einstein, equipped with the keys to the door of everything. Love is the ultimate answer. Love is the common denominator of every single scientific inquiry. But he knows such a truth is scandalous heresy, right? So you kind of end where you begin, right? We started with ethos, we end with ethos, right? Go back to the thesis, echo it all back. So students often say, how many sentences should a syllogistic body paragraph be? And that's a very good question. Those little itty bitty 4 or 5 sentence baggers that they write on the exam, don't cut it. And I think the readers would agree with that. There's not enough support and analysis in there to really advance an argument. So I tell my students, shoot for 10 sentences, hard cap at 12. This one here is exactly 12 sentences, I believe. So it gets a little bit on the long side, a little wordy, I admit, but it's still nonetheless very methodical. It's very cogent, and that line of reasoning stays intact from start to finish. So it's very good. So the next question is this: what do I do next? So my students write 4 paragraphs for all FRQs, Lang and Lit. So 4 paragraphs: intro, 2 bodies, conclusion. So they just bust out another syllogism. There's a whole bunch of terms and devices that we have not analyzed yet. And plus the middle and end of the letter have not been analyzed yet. So that's going to come in the second body paragraph. So you just re-front load that first premise. It's going to be 3 sentences long. Choose new terms and devices. What's left? Choose new quotes, new paraphrases, 10 to 12 sentences. Voila, you are done. And then throw a conclusion paragraph on it. And you're good to go. So hopefully that's useful. It's absolutely a fascinating letter. It's rife for discussion and very eye-opening for students to read something that spiritual and that grounded in a profound theory of love and just kindness and grace, especially, in an era where we're talking a lot about SEL. I think this is a perfect piece to bring it into classrooms that are embracing the SEL component. So know that my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind is now being run through the National Writing Project. I'm still the lead teacher, but the National Writing Project has endorsed my work, and we are offering the course through them. Cool thing is, you get 10 PD hours. You get a badge of completion for 10 hours, and really it's only a 5-week or a 5-hour course. So every Sunday night at 7 p.m., we meet at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We meet for 1 hour. So the next course is beginning September 25th, and we'll be running a regular cadence throughout the academic year. So 5 weeks to run the course, 2 weeks off, 5 weeks run it, 2 weeks off. So you can check the calendar at www.nwp.org, or you can look at my website, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, or you can email me, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. If you would like these slides, just feel free to email me and let me know. Also know that now that the academic year is kicking off in the New England states where I'm at, I'm in upstate New York, I'll be doing a regular appearance with Perfection Learning. I'll be doing some free webinars with them throughout the academic year. So stay posted on that. And then lastly, I'll be presenting with my good friends Brandon Abden and Tim Freitas at the NCTE conference this coming fall, November, in Anaheim, California. So hope that suits you well. Be well for now. Happy teaching and happy writing.